Now, it's time on the programme for today's perspective, and hardly a week goes by, in fact, hardly a day goes by here in France at the moment without the issue of sexual violence being in the news, whether it be the frightening story that went worldwide, of course, of Dominique Pellicot, as well as stories about French celebrities Gérard Depardieu convicted last year of sexual assault, or the French singer Patrick Bruel taken into custody last week as multiple women came forward to accuse him of sexual assault and rape. The main story, perhaps, though, that has been splashed across the front pages in the last few weeks here, though, has been that of Lyhanna, the 11-year-old girl murdered, with the prime suspect several times being denounced beforehand to police as a sex offender. Well, we're going to take stock by talking now to Sarah McGrath, who's CEO for Women France. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us today. I mean, the story of Lyhanna, I mean, it's really shaken the public here and really shown up the problems, hasn't it, in the French justice system. People just asking, how on earth could this have happened?
Yes, absolutely. We're all absolutely devastated by this story. But one thing that I really want to stress is the case of Lyhanna is not an exceptional case. It is not a dysfunction that's been very exceptional, or that it's been one person or one individual within the justice system that has committed an error. This is the typical functioning of the French justice system. Those of us, like myself and my colleagues, who work in this system day in, day out, this is completely normal. The fact that the accused had been already signalled, there had already been reports of him raping a girl and other sexual assault on minors, the fact that that had been reported and that there was absolutely no investigation, that is completely standard in France. Every day we come across victims who say, but I made a police complaint a year ago for really serious crimes and I've got all of this evidence that my lawyer and I put together to help with the investigation, and I never heard anything back. That's the standard in France.
So why is that then? Is it simply a question of money, lack of resources?
It's a question of a lack of resources, absolutely, but it's also a lack of prioritising this subject. So I often talk about we don't have to look further than French prisons to understand what the priority of the French justice system is. In our prisons, it's usually young men from disadvantaged backgrounds who actually need our support more than anything, who are there for theft or petty crimes like selling cannabis, these sorts of things. And that's who's in our prisons. Who's not in our prisons are rapists who have very lax, even if they are convicted, which is very rare, they have very, very lax sentencing. So there's a lack of prioritisation of violence against children and women, that's certain. But we also have an issue of the lack of resources. So judges have been crying out for a very long time that they are overwhelmed. They have piles and piles and piles of cases that they're just not able to treat. And we do have some really great judges who want to take these cases seriously, but simply can't. I think that France has 4 times less than per capita in terms of procurers per person who lives in France compared to the European average. So it's a real problem, the lack of resources, but also just the prioritisation. The fact that it's not treated urgently is really concerning.
Is it also difficult to prove? Does that make it harder to investigate, and therefore people think, well, let's do the other thing because at least we can get people behind bars?
Yes, that's really interesting, and I'm really glad you asked me that question, because it's a common misconception for those for people who don't work in our field, who think, oh, it's a case of he said, she said. It's difficult. Who do we believe? But that's actually not the case. There is always a significant amount of evidence. They just need to investigate. They need to look at text messages. We've seen cases, and this is very, again, representative. These are not one-offs, where the victim has provided physical evidence. They've provided text messages where the abuser has even apologised. There's been witnesses, but the witnesses haven't been contacted. None of the evidence has been taken into account, and the case is simply dropped. That's ridiculous. So these cases are not hard to try.
Yeah.
They're just
not investigated. And the French government, I mean, a lot of the ministers have come out and defended the justice system, haven't they? I mean, does that make you angry?
Yes, it does. It makes me very angry. And I find that the ministers and the Prime Minister who have defended the French justice system, saying they have complete confidence in the French justice system, that is an insult to every victim, every woman victim, every child victim of sexist and sexual violence in this country, who all live exactly the same process. They make a complaint, they gather evidence, and then nothing. Or if they do eventually go to trial, which is rare, they are attacked on the stand, they are treated like they are the criminal, they end up in debt because in France you're well advised to hire a lawyer if you're a victim to take the case forward, so they end up with a load of debt. And so for a minister, a leader, to say he has confidence in the French justice system is infuriating.
I mentioned at the top there's some of those other cases, Gisèle Pellico, the case of Gérard Depardieu, the case of Patrick Bruel. I mean, all those cases coming to light over the last year or so. I mean, does that encourage you? Does that make you think, well, at least now people are starting to make these things more obvious, whereas before maybe they were all behind closed doors? Some of these cases, notably involving celebrities as well, are starting to come out and people are actually reporting on them?
That is a very positive thing. So I don't want to diminish how important it is that victims are speaking out, and these victims who courageously speak out, often at the cost of their reputation, of all of the online harassment they get afterwards. They are really moving this address forward. But it's not just the cases that are being exposed, it's also the attitudes, because in the reactions we see really alarming attitudes. We saw when President Macron defended Gérald Depardieu, saying that he was an honour to France when he was facing really serious sexual violence allegations. So we're seeing all of these really horrific attitudes as well. So what it's exposed to us, not just how many cases there are and how many perpetrators there are and how many women and children are affected by this issue, we're also seeing the breadth of the issue culturally and how many terrible attitudes there are.
And talking about attitudes, I mean, I had a look at your website yesterday, which talks a lot as well about women who've suffered maybe not sexual abuse, but violent, but financial abuse, mental abuse as well. I mean, that's really important to try to tackle too.
That's a very important thing, and that's something that we do not do well in France. So a lot of the types of abuse that are commonly accepted globally are not yet illegal in France. They don't yet appear in our penal code. So things like economic abuse, where a partner will coerce someone into debt, their partner into debt, their victim into debt. They will take control of all of the finances. They'll deny access to resources and completely control. There's nothing in the French penal code that makes that illegal. The same for administrative violence, which impacts immigrant women. If our right to residence in France is linked to a partner, usually that partner, if he's an abuser, will use that fact to say, you have to do exactly as I say, or you're going to lose your right to live here. And that's not in the French penal code either. We don't have coercive control laws. So France doesn't even have good domestic abuse laws. So it's culture, it's the resources in the justice system, it's the laws. We need radical reform. This is a country who has a justice system in crisis and simply is not legitimate to handle cases of violence against women and children.
You're talking about the culture of France there. Do you think it's just France? I mean, presumably a lot of these stories could be echoed across many other countries as well.
So when I talk about France, we often do the comparison with its European neighbours. So yes, Spain has made great progress recently. Obviously, they've still got a long way to go. In the UK, there's been a lot of progress. There's coercive control laws. There's really interesting measures that have been put in place. Whereas France just tends to not want to change, not want to change a law, not want to move forward on this issue. And the resistance to putting in proper laws and financing this issue, because when we come down to it, we're going to need funding to make sure that we do have enough judges, that there are services for victims, that there are prevention programs. There's no political will. And we see that in the reactions recently.
Sarah, thanks very much for coming in and talking to us. Sarah McGrath, CEO of Women for Women in France. Thanks very much.